September
No, it's not.
September 20th, 2022. The Lawrence Board of Zoning Appeals is called to order at this time. I need a motion and a second for the approval of the minutes from August 16th, 2022.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Minutes stand as written. I also need a motion and a second for the approval of the minutes from the executive session from September 6, 2022.
So moved.
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Minutes stand as written. If you have not done so, please sign in at the back of the room. And anyone wishing to speak tonight, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Answer with I do. Thank you. At this time, do we have any special requests tonight, continuance, withdrawals, or waivers?
The attorney for petition 22 LUSV 14 7955 Oak Landing Road requested continuance to the November 15, 2022 meeting with notice. The motion was granted, or the request was granted.
Okay. We will now go to old business, 22 LSV 10, 7485 East 46th Street, a variance of development standard of the City of Indianapolis Consolidated Zoning Subdivision Ordinance 744-911-7. No advertising sign shall be permitted which displays video or emitting graphics. And 744-911B2D, no sign shall be permitted which displays video or emitting graphics.
Hello, evening members of the board. Appreciate the opportunity to come back and talk to you all about some of the questions that we had out there that we wanted some more definitive answers to. If you take a look at,
I'm sorry, for the record, can we start with your name and
I'm sorry,
address?
Jason Graham.
Thank you,
Lamar
Jason.
Advertising, 5711 West Minnesota Street, 46241.
Thank you.
If you take a look at this green packet that was part of what you were given, on the third page where it says advertisers that utilize this particular location, Mr. Yates, this was for you. You had a question about advertisers that would be using the sign. So I wanted to come back to that. I looked at the last 10 advertisers that we did over the last year, just to give you guys clear examples of who's been on the sign. So these would be typical advertisers that would use it in the future. Indy City Tire, Lift Academy, Children's Museum, Domino's, Hoosiers Contractors, Brickyard, Geico, Holiday World, Baileywood Financial, Wins, etc. So those are the past 10 advertisers that we had. So
Thank you.
just to kind of give you a little more better accurate picture of who uses that sign.
Our IT group is asking that you talk into the microphone. They can't hear you on the feed.
Is that better?
Yes,
Okay. And then,
sorry, thank you.
oh, no problem. And Mr. Mauser, I went to some great lengths to try to pull this off, and I'm actually surprised I was able to. You really wanted solar panels. So I reached out to our IT department, and I had mentioned that we use them in other areas, and we hadn't really found them, we hadn't used them in Indiana. So we are now going to be the first one, and you're going to be the first, should this variance pass, to have solar panels on a digital billboard. We don't expect there to be enough electricity to run the board, but it's not been done here. So if you turn, there's a separate page, this one right here. We're going to put an array that'll be 250 watts, so 1,000 watts total. You'll see that the diagram on the second page is how it will be configured. That is a little beyond me to give you the, define those specs. And then on the back of that page, you'll see what the array actually looks like on a billboard. So this billboard is it's a V structure. So the arrays will actually be in the center, so they won't really come out or stick out or be any sort of obtrusive. They'll just go along the top of the structure. I've already reached out to AES, and we will need a level 1 application. So obviously, there's not any reverse metering anymore, but we will be putting the power back into our own system to help run the digital billboard. And hopefully with that, we might be able to learn something on how we might be able to use it more to our advantage in Indiana. So this will be the first one.
Very impressive.
So, go back to the green packet. These were some of the questions that I know were very important. They're important to me as well. If you look at where it says fuel consumption, I know we were kind of trying to figure out how to quantify, right? What's the impact that this is going to have? So I kind of took it upon myself, what would be the most important to me? And, I looked at the fuel consumption, because to me, that's what's important. We see this going with our country right now. We're about to spend $1 billion on 53,000 miles of electronic chargers across the country. So we're trying to reduce, fuel consumption. And if you take a look, this is a typical, this board was a static, and I use a 10-year comparison because the digital lasts for 10 years. So I figured that was a fair comparison. If we were to post a static vinyl on the static billboard 10 times over the course of a year, and of course it doesn't matter how many times we change the flip on the digital, that's the point. We have to order a vinyl. Now, they can come from anywhere, but I used an average. Agencies ship them to me from California, from New York. We do a lot of business out of Denver, so I picked that one. That billboard would have to travel 526 miles. We recycle our vinyls, but those vinyls are picked up once a quarter, and they're brought out to Rare Form in California. They're actually reused. They're made into different products. But to have a truck come and pick that up, we're up to, and we did that 4 times over the course of a year. That's 8,268 miles. Over a 10-year period, that's 135,000 miles. The average 18-wheeler gets about 10 miles to the gallon. So that means 13,528 gallons of fuel used on that static billboard over the course of a year. And then if you turn, there should be, okay. He left the page out. I apologize. So I can tell you what the numbers are. So when you compare that to the digital billboard, we order our digitals from Ohio, which is, and when those are shipped, you're looking at about 300 miles. When those are recycled, they're sent back to St. Louis. They're recycled in St. Louis. I think it's about another 180 miles. I did an average, to be fair, of 1 service trip per year for the first 5 years, and then figured that we probably would be visiting it twice a year over the second 5 years. And that board's only 15 miles from our office. So we came in just under 500 miles in a pickup truck. So we were looking at around, I think it was about 175 gallons of gas. So it was a tremendous decrease in use of fossil fuel. And to me, that was probably the most impactful thing that I could compare, because I know we weren't really asked a specific question. So that's what I wanted to look at when I was looking at how would this be better than what's already there. And it would be the fuel consumption would be dramatically decreased. I did include a page in there. We look at, the board is going to use more electricity, but I did want to give us a good idea of the technology that the board uses. The boards built today use 23% of the power from the signs from 2005. During the day, they run at 80% of the capacity, and at night, they run down to just 5% of the electricity used for 12 hours at night. There's very little needed because of the dimming at night. This is just a little, I know we talked about the photocell capacity, that it automatically changes, but just so you know, there's 256 levels of dimming. It's probably more than you wanted to know, but I thought that was pretty interesting. That's how incremental it gets, depending on how cloudy the day might be, or if it's dusk or dawn. So it's constantly evolving. That's actually very important for the safety factor too. So, and then just in short, if you really want to kind of compare it, that this billboard is going to use about the same electricity as your average household with 2 EV cars over the course of a year. So if you looked at this billboard as a business, which it is, I mean, it's a storefront, it's using as much electricity as a residential home. If you look at it that way, it's about, I mean, that's pretty impressive. I mean, if you were to have an actual storefront as my business that generated that revenue, we'd be using a lot more power consumption. So I think that was another fair way to try to assess that. I also gave some information on the back page of where all this information came from. I know Shelley had made a comment that she'd love to believe me. So I put, Faith, I'm sorry. But she'd love to believe me, so all the information that I've given you can be found on the websites that are on the back. And then lastly, it was, I know it was very important that we wanted to know what happens to these signs when they're done. And if you look at the back, or I'm sorry, the third page in on Daktronics sustainability, there's some good information in here that shows that this company, is a sustainable company, green company. But if you look at where the pie chart is, this will tell you that the display is 98% recyclable, and then it breaks it down into what the components are. 64% of the construction that's aluminum, electronics. The 2% that's not recycled is ground up and used in creating asphalt. So 100% of this board, no e-waste ends up in a landfill whatsoever. And I think that's pretty important. I think that's what we want to know is at what point down the road is this going to come back to us that we're filling up landfills? Nothing ends up in a landfill. And then, Mr. Yates, you also asked about certifications. The recycler that we used, if you look on the third page, Lamar uses only R2 certified recyclers for digital displays that are no longer in use. That came about so that companies would not tout that they recycled the components, but not all of them. So if you're R2 certified, that basically means nothing will end up in a landfill. So everything is accounted for. And that's the only type of recycler that we use. Do you have any questions for me?
I want to thank you for answering all the board's questions that were given to you last month. Very thorough.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And that is a commitment on the solar panels. I don't think that was in our application, but we'll commit, that is a commitment.
So you're willing to commit to the 7 recommendations here from the city?
Yes.
And number 8 would be solar panels, right?
Correct.
Does the board have any questions at this time? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We will now hear from any remonstrators that are for or against the petition. Seeing that there's none, we'll hear from the city of Lawrence.
This is Dan Zerner. Can you hear me?
Yes, Dan.
Good evening, councilors. I appreciate your service. I also want to compliment Lamar. I think they've spent an awful lot of time trying to answer and respond to the concerns of the board. The city and staff recommended last month that this be approved for numerous reasons, not the least of which that we feel like NDOT actually has jurisdiction of this more than the city does. And with their tacit approval, the city sees no reason to deny this application, particularly based upon the information that was just presented to us by Lamar. That is our position. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions for the city of Lawrence? Since there isn't any, the petitioner, do you have anything else to add?
We're excited to working with the city of Lawrence.
Okay. Is the board ready to vote at this time?
Yes.
We'll be voting on 22 LSV-10, 7485 East 46th Street, variance of development standard of the City of Indianapolis Consolidated Zoning Subdivision Ordinance 744-911-7. No advertising sign shall be permitted which displays video or emitting graphics, and 744-11B2D, no sign shall be permitted with display video or emitting graphics. Let's see, this is mine. Along with the 8 commitments, the 8th one being added tonight. The board has unanimously granted your petition, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graham.
Now the board will hear case 22 LSV-13, 12515 to 12519 East 65th Street, a variance of development standard of the City of Indianapolis, Consolidated Zoning Subdivision Ordinance Table 742-103-1, to allow a 3-acre parcel to be split into 2 parcels of 1.5 acres each.
Hi, my name is Tracy Magus. I live at 12515 East 65th Street. Back in 1978, my father, John Jones, he bought 2 1.5-acre lots. And when he came to do the paperwork, he had both lots combined for a 3-acre lot. He built his house at 12519 on the east side of the property, he built on 1.5-acre lots. He left the other 1.5-acre lot open in case one of his children wanted to build a house one day. And I was the child that wanted to build the house one day. So back in 1996, I went through a variance hearing to build a house next to my parents, and that was granted. So I currently have 2 houses on a 3-acre lot. I've tried to get an equity loan to do some renovations on my house, and I am not able to do that. We've had 3 appraisers come out, and they can't appraise the property the way it sits. They say it's not being used to the best of its ability. The property's probably, my guess is around $400,000, the 2 houses. And I was asking for a loan for $50,000, and I can't get that. They said unless that property is split, because they can't evaluate the property because there's nothing to compare it to anywhere else. There's nowhere in Lawrence, Indianapolis, that has 2 houses sitting right next to each other that they can go off of to build an appraisal. So tonight I'm asking if we can go back to the way it was originally, split the property in half so that I have 2 1.5-acre lots.
So what was the first variance that we did for it?
Back in 1996, that variance was for me to build my house, which is 12515. And then my parents' house was 12519. 65th Street's addresses are really wonky, so, but they're right next to each other. If you go down 65th Street, you wouldn't see any difference between both of my houses. It just looks like 2 houses on the road.
So what you're wanting to do then, you built the house on the property. And the reason we gave you a variance at that time?
Was to build the second house, my house.
Okay. So now,
My mom and dad, they built their house in 1981. And I built right next to them.
okay, so now you're wanting to just, and it would meet all those setback requirements?
Yeah, so it's going to meet all your setback requirements. The only thing it doesn't meet is its zone DA, which requires a 3-acre lot. This currently is a 3-acre lot
Okay.
with 2 houses on it. The problem is the bank can't appraise the property because there's nothing comparable in this area.
Okay.
So she's wanting to split it back into 1.5 acre lots. When I looked on our map, 65th Street, most of it is zone DA. There are 11 parcels on her side of the street, and only 3 of them were 3 acres or more. Most of them are anywhere from 1 acre to 2.5 acres.
Okay.
So on that street, she wouldn't be out of line to have a 1.5 acre property. Each of them. Her father have a 1.5, her have a 1.5. There are a couple of 3 acre properties. There are a couple of properties that are more than 3 acres on her side of the street and the other side, which it's in the staff report there. I think I said, yeah, so 16 parcels on the south side of 65th Street. Only 3 parcels, including this one, are 3 acres or larger. The rest of them are 2 to 2.5. The north side of the street, they vary in size from less than an acre up to 5 acres.
Okay.
So what she's asking would be in line with the rest of the neighborhood
Okay.
and allow her to
Just
get a
going
property.
back to the way it was when my dad bought the properties.
Okay.
They're both currently, there's no mortgage on either house. I own them clear and free. My daughter actually lives in the house, in my mom and dad's house.
Okay. Does the board have any questions at this time?
Yes, I have one. Your legal description, both houses must have the same legal description?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's all
so it
about
goes
half.
beyond more than just
Yeah, she'll have to have
appraisal.
surveys done.
Yeah, but each house has the same legal description.
Yeah.
So, and that's one reason you can't get a loan. If you got the loan, the liens on your daughter's or your parents' house.
Right, you know, and at the time while doing it, before I knew I was going to have to go into this, I was actually putting both houses up
For security.
for security, whereas, I mean, I didn't have a
Yeah.
problem with that, you know, but, and this helps
Someday
out.
you may
Yes.
sell them and, yeah.
One house is being left to my daughter and my house is being left to my son. So it just kind of helps take care of the problem now than down the road also.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody here for or against the petition? Seeing that there's none, we'll hear from the City of Lawrence.
I kind of already gave
Good
her.
evening. Good evening, Dan Turner, Director of Economic Development for the City of Lawrence, speaking on behalf of Sri Venugopalan, City Engineer. We have reviewed this. Actually, we think it makes more logic to have them separated than to keep them together because it's extremely unusual to see 2 houses on the same parcel, particularly with the same legal description. We think it's in the best interest of the city to see this separated, have the legal descriptions cleaned up, and allow the petitioner to move on with their business. I would much rather support her getting a loan to improve her property than as we have in so many cases where people are not willing to invest in their property. So it makes sense. This is a way to promote economic development in terms of helping people keep their property up. I'm 100% in favor of this petition. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions for the City of Lawrence? Not hearing none. Petitioner, you have anything else to add? The board now will be voting on, okay, what did I do with it? 22 LSV 13, 1215, 12515 to 12519 East 65th Street, a variance of development standard of the City of Indianapolis Consolidated Zoning/Subdivision Ordinance, Table 742-103-1, to allow a 3-acre parcel to be split into 2 parcels of 1.5 acres each. Board has unanimously granted your petition. With there not being any more business, the Lawrence Board of Zoning Appeals is adjourned.